Hi, I'm Nic Steenhout, and this is The Work Between. In case you didn't know, I provide transcript reviewed for accuracy by a human for every episode at the time of publishing. There's a text-only transcript that you could read if audio isn't the best media for you. There's also a time transcript you can follow along while listening if that works better for you. You can access those directly on the podcast's website if they aren't displayed by your podcast aggregator. That's theworkbetween.show. Before I get into what the show is, I want to say whose land it's made on. This podcast is recorded on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Stolo Coast Salish people, the people of the river, whose presence in the Fraser Valley stretches back thousands of years. I named this territory because it belongs with what this show is about. The ways we decide whose lives are valued, whose work is taken seriously, and whose experiences are treated as problems to be managed. Those decisions shape everything. This show sits inside that. This is, was, and always will be First Nations land. That's not a formality. It's consistent with everything I and this show stand for. My guest today is me. A couple people told me they'd be interested to learn more about my creative processes. I thought about it and concluded it could be fun to have me as a guest on my own show. To make it more interesting, I invited a friend and colleague to be the interviewer. Mark Miller is someone who, like me, works in digital accessibility and inclusion. He is a photographer and majored in art. He also is a martial artist, and he co-hosts the Inclusion Impact podcast. I have tremendous respect for him and was chuffed when he accepted to play this game. I gave Mark carte blanche. I didn't know what questions he was going to ask or what direction he was going to take. It was great fun, and I hope you enjoy our discussion as much as we did. Mark, thank you so much for being a good sport and agreeing to play the role of the host for this episode.
You are very welcome, and I want to thank you for inviting me to do that. It's honestly an honor. I think you and I have long been fans of each other's content, so for you to think enough of me to invite me in is a huge honor, and I really appreciate it. And I'm very excited for this opportunity to get into your brain a little bit.
Yep.
And not just around this accessibility subject that you and I tend to talk a lot about, but to understand you, your art, your creative process, all these really cool things that you and I haven't had a chance to really dig into quite as much yet. So this is going to be great. On that note, why don't we get started right away and just tell me a little bit about the artwork that you do and what your processes around it.
I would say I'm a serial hobbyist. Over the years, I've tried so many things, from leatherworking to bone carving to wool felting. But I would say the three main creative endeavors that I'm doing regularly and that are sustained are around wildlife photography, particularly birds, around quilting, and around watercolor and sketching.
What would you say, like, at heart, you seem to be a maker, right? And you're getting your hands into anything where you can express yourself creatively. What, through that process, what caused you to land on these three things as your primary outlets?
I'm not too sure. Maybe in parts is if you try enough pair of shoes, you're going to find one that actually feels comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if I think around the sketching and the watercolor, if I go back as far back as being 7, 8, 9, I always wanted to do drawing and painting. My
Mm-hmm.
parents even gave me an oil painting kit. My grandfather built an easel for me, and I gave up at the time because it was too hard. My cousin, who was a couple years older, did stuff that I thought, oh, it's so wonderful. I'll never be able to do as good, and I kind of gave up. Um, so over the period of my long and venerable life, I've come back over and over and over again to painting. Um, and suddenly I decided, well, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to actually do the hard work. I'm going to do the
Mm-hmm.
practice. People say, oh, Nick, you have talent. No, I don't. I have zero talent. There's not a talented bone in my body. It's all about perseverance and skill building. Um, Around sewing and quilting is a little bit similar. That my mother taught me how to do sewing when I was a kid using her old Singer sewing machine. It was really more about being self-sufficient and being able to mend my clothes more than anything. But I had that exposure back then, and then I worked with leather, doing hand sewing leather, and I don't know, it kind of evolved. And when I started doing quilting with fabric, it kind of like the piece of puzzle came together. And photography, well, I've been playing with photography on and off since I was a teenager and always wanted to do wildlife, but never really had the funds to have the gear that would allow me to do
Mm-hmm.
half decent shots. And as I get older, that became a little bit easier, but it's certainly not a cheap hobby. So once you get your gear, you keep the gear and work it to death.
You know, when I first asked you this question, you sort of gave, I think, the most interesting answer, and that was, I don't know. Right? I don't know why I land on these things, and then of course you went through to clarify. But the reason why that's interesting to me is because I think it's an honest answer, right? Like, if you had asked me that question, I don't know that I could have articulated out of the gate why I've chosen the things I've chose, and it just goes to show that art is a lot about self exploration. The reason why you may
Mm.
not have an answer is because in some undefinable way that art is working inside of you to do something. So what I'm curious about, thinking about that, Nick, and the subject that you and I do cross a lot is accessibility and disabilities. And I feel like there has to be some sort of a connection between, you know, disability, your work and accessibility, and that internal fulfillment and exploration and discovery and all those things that art gives you. Do you find that it connects those parts of your life or is connected to those parts of your life? Or are they really independent things for you?
Well, they're connected because it's all about me. I mean, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that because, oh, look at me, it's all about me, but it really is part of who I am and what I do. So, in that sense, they're connected. But I think I'm feeding very different aspects of myself with the creative processes I do for enjoyment and
Mm-hmm.
the work I do in accessibility. Uh, there's a certain level of creativity, I think, around accessibility where you
Yeah.
have to put your thinking cap on and you have a problem and you try to solve it and you figure it out, you nut it out. But for me, accessibility work is a lot more about making the outside world better for other people. Whereas my creative processes is about making me better.
Mm. It's a great way to frame it.
So it's
Makes a lot of
outward
sense.
looking and inward looking.
Well, and then it seems to me that there's a bit of, and this is just my observation of you, Nick, but that there's a bit of an event horizon between those two things that comes in the form of some of the content that you create for the accessibility industry. You leverage that your deep ability to create and to, I think when you create, you can bring things together. You particularly have a talent for explaining complex subjects to uh, people who may not be deep into that subject. But I think that when you create that content, I can see that creative nature in you as a component to that. So
Thank
to
you.
me, that would be that event horizon. But it sounds like when you view it for yourself, you really look at it as something that is maybe a break from what you would consider to be your professional
Mm,
life. It's another way to work the brain. Is that a fair
yeah,
assessment?
absolutely. As someone who is disabled, working in the field of accessibility, I used to joke that accessibility work is not a job, it's a lifestyle.
Mm,
And in many ways, I can't not need a ramp when I go to the store when it's after 5 p.m. and I've stopped working. So accessibility, I always need to advocate for that.
hmm
Um, the sketching, the photography, the quilting is for me a way to do things away from that. It's a
Yeah.
way to relieve the pressure of constantly being in almost fight or flight um, reaction. There was a great post from Sherry Bernhaber on LinkedIn recently where she was describing the spike of hormones that you're experiencing when you're always having to advocate for accessibility. And then she took it one layer deeper and explained how these spikes of hormones and stress and everything gets exacerbated when you start talking to other people with disabilities that are experiencing their own things, and then you're working in a community, so you get very little relief from that constant um, constant stress reaction around facing a non-accessible world. So because of that, I as I'm getting older, I'm realizing I need to have a break to not
Mm.
burn out.
It's that
um,
cortisol management.
yeah.
We need to bring it
And
all down at some point. Yeah.
Uh, and because I work with computers so much, I mean, this it's 100% of what I do.
Yeah.
Um, Having activities that take me away from the screen is wonderful. A sketch, I can do that. I have a pad of paper, a pen, a few watercolors. I can be outside in nature doing that. I can do this anywhere.
Yeah.
Quilting, same thing. Whether I do it with a machine or I do hand sewing, I don't need a computer or anything to do that. The wildlife photography is a little bit different because, well, actually, I don't work in film anymore, and I need to process my photos, so it requires a
Requires.
screen at
Yeah.
some part of the process.
Yeah.
But the advantages of this creative practice can only happen when I'm out in nature, looking
Mm.
at birds, animals, listening to bird song, to the sound of the breeze in the trees and all that. That's all part of the experience that has nothing to do with my work.
Yeah. Or your disability. It's all stuff that
Yeah.
you're doing. That's just, yeah. And I think, it strikes me there's a lot of there's a lot of research, a lot of talk, a lot of ancient sort of wisdom out there around the mental health benefits of being in
Mm.
nature.
Yep.
And I think if you're anything like me, Nick, what you're describing is taking that a step further, and with something that's more tactile. It's not digital. It's not your computer. It's your paintbrush, your pencil, your sewing machine. In the case of photography, it's a little bit of in between, but and actually participating in nature, right? In drawing back and forth,
Yeah.
like engaging with it. Um, do you so in full disclosure for your listeners, I'm a studio arts major. My background is in photography as well, but I've dabbled just like you in all of those things, being a studio arts major. And so one of the questions, or one of the things I always get curious about when I talk to other artists like yourself, is the influences that they've had.
Mm.
Is there anybody that you would point to, either famous or within your own life, that's influenced the work that you do artistically?
I have so many different influences, and some I can tie directly, and some are a lot more vague.
Mm-hmm.
I think in large part my interest in art has come from the fact my dad is an arts collector and had
Who's a
several
collector?
friends who were artists. One of my dad's friends' name is Miljenko Horvat. He lived in Quebec, but he's a Hungarian modern artist. He passed away? Um, so I've been surrounded with pieces of art, mostly modern art, but
Mm-hmm.
also pieces of more classical paintings. So I think that shaped an understanding of art as important. Uh, I recently had my a conversation with my dad, who is telling me, Nick, you're doing these sketches, and that's great, but really you don't understand art. And yeah, okay, Dad, you're right. I do not understand art because I don't spend time trying to analyze it. I just want to make it happen.
Yeah.
Um, so that in part is why drawing and sketching and painting is important. In terms of more direct influences, with what I like to do is all the urban sketching movement. Um, this idea of painting on location, from life, capturing a moment in time, and there's a certain style that comes out. I mean, everybody does it differently, but there's a lot of line and wash that comes out of that. I like to capture those ideas. In terms of quilting, I don't know that I have any particular influences. I've just always liked quilt. Um, I was lucky enough to travel through the U.S. We were full time traveling in an RV, and we stopped in Kentucky, in Paducah, and there's a National Quilt Museum there. And this was just before I started doing quilting, and we spent several wonderful hours exploring that, which is all around modern quilts. And then my wife surprised me with a book of how to make your own sampler quilt entirely from scratch. And I think I put in 12,000 stitches in that
Wow.
product, and I'm really happy with it. But you know, my wife jokes that she created a monster, because
Mhm.
after doing that one, then I had to do another one and another one and another one. And I haven't had a chance to quilt in the last 18 months because we were moving and work and all that. But um, we finally have a room that is a dedicated craft and gaming room. So I'll be able to go back and finish the projects I started a year and a half ago. Photography, I don't know. Photography, I there's all the masters of street photography. Bresson in particular, I like his style. Um, Adams, I like his style, but I don't think I'm trying to replicate what they're doing. But it's more in terms of,
Bresson, Paris, black and white,
yeah,
20s.
yeah,
Yep. Okay, I know who you're talking about. I would not
we,
have pronounced it that way, but I think you're probably pronouncing it correct since you are speaking his native tongue.
yeah. What I like about him is this approach of, funnily enough, capturing real life moment, snapshot of time which in a way ties into urban sketching, but it's this
The
uh,
decisive moment.
decisive moment. Now,
Mhm.
what we know of his photos, they're wonderful, but we also, if you dig into it a little bit, you realize that there's a lot of negatives that may never made it to print, right? But to have that, what's the word I'm looking for? That hmm, it's that instant spontaneity. Um,
Spontaneity.
to have that spontaneity, whether you're sketching or taking photos, you have to have taken 10,000 bad photos. You have to have done 10,000 bad
Yep.
sketches. You have to have put in 10,000 hours in quilting before things start flowing. So to have that spontaneity, I think is what I'm hoping for at some point, to have enough practice and skills and muscle memory to not have to think about it and be
Mm.
spontaneous that way.
Yeah. The I want to dig into a couple things here, and in doing this, I'm going to challenge your father's statement that you don't understand art, because you mentioned a couple of times, you talked about the street, whether it's in reference to painting, whether it's in reference to photography, and this sort of urban landscape, which is very interesting to me, Nick, because what I know of your photography, you've shared back and forth with me your nature photos, which is very specifically the opposite of
Yeah.
that urban. But one of the things that you said that was really interesting is that you liked that sort of street art, in the on location art. And I don't know if you've been to, the last time I was in London, I was at the Leek Street Tunnel. And the Leek Street Tunnel is a place in London where it's okay to do graffiti. It's encouraged. And this idea of creating art on location, and art that in part and whole is probably temporary, because
Mm,
there's no rules, right? Or the rule is that if somebody paints a picture, you can come right behind them and paint over it. Or somebody may never paint over your picture, like, you
mm,
don't know. But to me, that urban art, that temporary nature of it, that on location, all those things, all the things that you described, to me, that's the true nature of art, right? Because it's evolving.
mm.
It is temporary. It is, when somebody paints over a part of your picture, they don't wipe out your picture, but they add the overall gallery,
Yeah.
right? The overall impression. So now what they did becomes a part of what you did. And then there's this, like, a bracket of time, this bracket of time that moves through time. Um, and then, in photography, there's the decisive moment. It's sort of humans in nature. Why do you think that you're drawn towards those urban landscapes that are moving and changing and temporary and raw, in some ways? I mean, you're talking about quilting and nature photography in the same breath, Nick. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
what's the attraction there? Like, why that dichotomy in your aesthetic? I'm asking hard questions, aren't I?
Yes, you are, and that's wonderful. I think it feeds different parts of my needs, um, but ultimately, it's all about quieting my brain. Right,
Mm,
my brain never stops. Um, I have I don't have a diagnosis, but I'm 99.9% certain I have ADHD, and part of that
me too.
is my brain never stops. I go to bed, my brain doesn't stop. I go to sleep, my brain doesn't stop. It's always going, except when I sketch, when I quilt, when I
Mm,
take photos. So these are different expressions of how do I self medicate without medication, if you want. Um, why urban sketching? Well, I've always liked architecture. I've always been interested in architecture. I've traveled a lot as a kid and then been exposed to architecture in Canada, in Montreal, in the US, in Africa, in Europe. Um, so I think there's beauty in buildings, whether they're 300-year-old buildings or newer ones. But also, more and more, I want to include people in my urban sketches because ultimately, like accessibility, it's about people.
Mhm.
So it's tying the human experience to the environment. Um, Quilting is a different beast altogether. Um, I think it's especially the patchwork part is making art that isn't related to the human experience, but
Mhm.
in the end, the quilt is to be used. For me, a quilt is not something you put on a wall or put in a box and forget about. A quilt, you use it,
You lay
and
it
it
over
wears
the
out.
wall.
Well, you
Yeah.
make another one.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
So you said something really interesting in there, and we've got a lot in common, Nick. And one of the things I think we have in common is sort of this undiagnosed ADD. I grew up in the '80s, and I'm self-diagnosed. Well, I'm diagnosed now with ADD, but ultimately I didn't have that diagnosis, and then also dyslexia, and so it really resonates with me when you talk about um, these different artistic endeavors quieting the brain,
Mm,
or almost to me it's almost like just aligning thoughts that tend to be sort of all over the place, right? Do you find that, like, think about something like sketching, is it hard in and hard out for you? And what I mean by that is sometimes I have a hard time through all that deciding I'm going to sit down and draw something,
mm.
or that I'm going to go out and take pictures. But once I'm in that, I now have a hard time stopping. And I have a hard time not thinking, like, if I leave a work unfinished, it's on my mind until I feel like I've finished it. Is that your experience? Is that are you narrowing your focus once you get into it on that piece of artwork, or is it something different for you? I'm curious if do we have a similar experience or if it's different.
Yeah, it varies for me. Sometimes I say, okay, I'm going to take half hour and do a sketch.
Hmm.
And I just fiddle. I have my note, my sketchbook and my pen, and I'm not getting anywhere. And sometimes I kind of thought, oh, well, I'm just gonna doodle, and I end up sucked in immediately, and I
Yeah.
lift my head and, oh, what do you mean 2 hours have gone by?
Right.
Right? Um, and some days I want to do these things. Some days I want to um do sketching, or I want to grab my camera and go out. It's a beautiful day. The light is nice. It's not too hot and not too cold, and I just can't. I don't have the spoons. I don't have the energy
Mhm.
to get going. So it's I don't think there's a specific pattern about that, but most of the time, once I start it, once I actually do it, then I'm so full in that the world could drop around me and I wouldn't know.
Hmm. That's interesting. Um, yeah, I would love to have that experience where the world. But I never have that. My ADD keeps me on the surface all the time. This is really where I wanted to end up here today because this is interesting to me. I was listening to your first podcast with Mia,
Yep.
and I was learning all sorts of things about you that I didn't know. And of course, there are things that we have in common, Nick, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Believe it or not. And one of them is that you mentioned a martial arts experience
Yeah.
in your past, and I'm wondering, within the context of this discussion of art. So I've got a strong martial arts past too. Um, uh, does that is that a part of this whole artistic experience for you? Does it influence it? Do the things that you learned mentally and physically? Do they play a part in your artwork at all, or is that yet another separate outlet that you had in your life, or still do? I don't know if you still do it or not.
Very different. Um, I started judo when I was 6 years old because I was being bullied, and it was
Hmm.
recommended that I do something that would give me the confidence to stand up in a way. And I did judo for 18 years. Um,
Wow.
I didn't like competition, and to reach black belt, you either had to do a technical approach, which was longer and harder, or go through competition, and people are brutal in competition.
Mm.
And that did not appeal to me at all. So I didn't quite reach my black belt in judo, but I did it for 18 years.
18 years is a lot of time on the mat for
Yeah,
anybody. Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm assuming, so I don't know a whole lot about your history of disability either, but I do know, or I think I know that you're a wheelchair user.
Mm,
That's correct, right? Was this prior to being a wheelchair user, or is this
yeah,
something that you did as a
yeah.
wheelchair user?
It kind of started fading out. The judo faded out when within about the same time range that I started having to use a wheelchair.
Okay.
Um, but also towards the end of doing judo, I was traveling a lot. I was a chef at the time,
Oh, wow.
which, hey, guess what?
Another
Another creative
artistic
endeavor.
outlet.
Yeah. Um, and I was slowing down the judo, but I started doing tai chi.
Mhm.
I learned tai chi, which is a lot easier to practice on your own than judo is, because there's only so many katas you can practice. Although in a way, tai chi is katas, but um, I started
Well,
doing
judo
tai.
is specifically designed to have an opponent in the
Yes,
in
yeah.
practice, and you're
There are some
bikini
katas
or
you
in your
can do, but
yeah.
it's yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But Tai Chi is more of a
uh, Tai
inner
Chi is a
movement.
more internal practice. I
Yeah.
mean, outwardly it looks like you're doing movements, but it's all about the how the internal goes.
Mm.
And from that perspective, Tai Chi is good for my brains as well because
Yeah.
it's a form of moving meditation. I occasionally try to start Tai Chi again, but it becomes a question of juggling how much spare time do I have in my day and
Mhm.
where do I want to focus my energies.
Yep.
Um, so at the moment, I choose to focus my energy in sketching and
I think the wonderful thing about any artistic endeavor, and including ones that where you move your body, like the martial arts, is that you can bring them back in times in your life.
Mm,
So drawing's been that way for me, where I go through long periods of time without drawing, and then for some reason, I have a need and I come back to it. So I think that's a brilliant thing, particularly with something like Tai Chi, is that if it doesn't provide value for you at this time in your life, then it doesn't make sense to do it.
yeah,
But it may provide value in the future, and there's nothing that says you can't circle back to it. Um, and then and I don't want to stay on this martial arts thing too long because really we're here to understand you as an artist. But I've got one final question because I can't
just
help
one more thing.
there was one more thing because I can't help myself. But have you ever thought about retooling your 18 years of judo to be into a wheelchair practice where you could use the same principles adopted for wheelchair?
I do.
Or did I just come up with an idea for you?
No, I think I'm actually doing that, but
Okay.
not in a martial art kind of way. Because 18 years of judo and solid 6 years of Tai Chi, forms how your body moves,
Yeah.
forms how you open doors even. I mean, the way you open a door, in a
Hmm.
wheelchair, you can't just pull on the door, because if you pull on the door, it's not the door that's going to open, it's your wheelchair that's going to move, right? So the way you use that push pull, that equal and opposite forces, the way
Hmm.
you're moving, all that is in a way integrated into my subconscious. And
That makes sense.
it's funny because years after stopping judo, 20 years after stopping judo, I actually took a pretty nasty tumble out of my wheelchair. I was going down a hill and my wheels locked on a rock. My chair stopped. I was going down and I flew out of my chair. And I ended up doing just a roll, judo roll,
Ukemi. Yeah, you're Ukemi.
just zoop, and that was it. Didn't get hurt. Some people that saw me tumble said, "Oh my God, Nick, what the hell was that?"
Hmm.
Looked very spectacular to people outside, but for me, it just came
Just another
naturally.
fall. Yeah, it was just another. How many times in your life had you done that? And this was
Yeah,
just another one. Yeah, that's. I mean, I think everybody should study at least the Ukemi, which is the falling part of judo, in their life, because I can't tell you how many times it's come into play for me. And if hopefully, if you're a martial artist, you'll never have to use the martial arts in your life, except for there's no way to avoid falling at some point
yeah,
in your life. So you will. I always tell people, like, tell my students, this is one of the most important things
yeah.
I'll teach you. And I can remember once running with my wife, and I tripped over a root, and it was just the same story. I went head first to the ground, but I rolled up out of it, stood up, and she, "Oh my God, are you all right?" I said, I looked at her and just smiled, and she goes, "Oh yeah, I forgot. Let's keep going." you know, but I probably fell 4 more times that day on the mat, in
Yeah.
practice or whatever. So it was just another moment of falling. So swinging back into your art a little bit, right? We've talked about, you sort of have settled on these different things that resonate with you, and they're all very different. This is what's impressive, right? Is that photography and quilting or you can't get very much more opposite than that, right? And then these things like drawing and watercolors kind of are somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. So I think it's wonderful that you figured out a way to kind of exercise this full spectrum of expression within art. Is there anything that you is there anything that you don't like about your art, or anything that you wished you had leaned into more in the as you were sort of coming up as an artist?
Several things. First, I wish I had persevered earlier. I
Hmm.
really picked up watercolors for the first time when was it? In the late 90s. I wish I had kept at it back then,
Yeah.
because by now I assume I would be happier with what I produce. I am my own worst critic. Um, I'm getting a lot of great feedback. People love what I'm doing, and it's good for the ego. But when I look at what I do, I'm rarely satisfied with what I've done. I
Hmm.
see all the faults. Um, People told me, "Hey, your bird photography is great. Maybe you should sell calendars or sell your art." And I'm looking at everybody else that I interact with that does bird photography, and I'm thinking, well, A, the market is flooded, and B, I'm okay, and maybe I'm better than people around me. But the reality is, I'm just a very, very basic bird photographer compared to other people. So from that perspective, you know, I like to share the work I do, but I'm not often happy with the work I do.
I'm agreeing with you, Nick, because you're describing what I feel just about every time I produce something, and it makes me wonder if we're wrong or if we're right about that feeling. You know what I mean? If everybody who's photographing birds or sketching looks at their work and feels the same way. And where I feel this the most, in that same sentiment of like, I wished I had dug deeper when I was younger, is with like figure drawing. I learned to figure draw in school, but I kind of left it in class, and I've come back to it at certain times, and I'll do a drawing and I'll be very happy with it. And then I'll look at it the next day and be like,
Yeah.
what did I do? This is not good.
This is where, for me, art is about the process, not about the outcome.
Mm,
I am much more satisfied with spending an hour sketching a bridge than I am with the finished bridge sketch.
yeah. That's a really great way to think about it and to put it. What are you most happy with? When you look at it and you go, this is in my art, I've accomplished. I'm so glad I've accomplished. Fill in the blank.
With sketching, what I'm working on most right now is perspective and values. So if I nail perspective and values on a sketch, it makes me happy. With quilting, it's sharp seams, points that are on points, and when I say points that are on points, is the corners where two different or three or four or five or six parts of fabrics are meeting, that they're
Mm-hmm.
meeting spot on. For bird photography, it's getting close enough to the bird to be able to have the eye sharp at about level. I don't want the birds to be all the way up or all the way down. And I like to capture motion.
Mm,
A bald eagle sitting on a branch doing nothing is impressive. They are really big birds. But I've got hundreds of bald eagles sitting on a branch doing nothing.
right.
And I said last year when I was out looking at bald eagle migration, I said to somebody else, and it's like, oh yeah, they're just sitting there, they're boring. And the person says, what do you mean they're boring? Well, they are. What we're waiting for is the action. They're taking off. They're splashing into water, grabbing a salmon. They're grabbing each other and swirling. That's what you're looking for. It's for the action. And what satisfies me most is when I have that action.
Mm. I think that, yeah, what you described is that evolution, right? And it's the decisive moment. So when you were first describing that, it was like, well, yeah, I don't know how jazzed I would be about capturing a bald eagle. Probably pretty jazzed, but just sitting there on a branch. But then I also don't know how big of a deal it would be to catch a bald eagle soaring overhead. But to capture a bald eagle in that moment when it's just about to take off and
Yeah.
it goes through that expression or whatever it is, where it's not sitting on the branch and it's not in flight, but it's somewhere in that moment in
Yeah.
between. I think that when the term decisive moment was coined, it was moments like that they were
Yep.
thinking about, that there's a particular thing about only at that moment could you click the shutter and capture that. If
Yep.
they're in flight, you could click the shutter 1,000 times. It's going to look very similar. Or if they're sitting there,
That's right.
So I completely understand, and I think
Yeah.
there's something when you hit that, like you feel it, it, and it's very, very satisfying.
It's learning the behavior of the bird too,
Mm,
because you can capture that great photo by sheer luck, or you can know, oh well, this bird has been sitting there for this long. It's starting to shuffle a little bit on the branch this way, and oh yeah, I know this is coming. I need to be
mm,
ready to take that photo.
yeah. It's
And
almost athletic in that sense of if you're hitting a shot when people are trying to defend you in basketball, it's recognizing the movements in the moment to take the
yeah,
shot. It's a very similar thing, and to your point, it's the process. It's all the work that goes before it to allow you to do that.
yeah.
That you do it for. If you had to, if you and I were going to meet on a deserted island and you were only able to bring one piece of artwork with you to show me, what would that be? I've never seen any of your artwork, but you have to bring one thing to show me. What would it be?
One of my quilts,
Oh, that's very interesting.
because I can't help being pragmatic and practical about life. So I'm going to
Mm.
show you this quilt, and we're on a deserted island, and we need to stay warm. So we're going to wrap up in my art and stay warm.
That is a fantastic answer. I absolutely love that. I'm thinking it's going to be like a picture or something, and you're like, no, we got to stay warm. So let's reverse that. I'm coming over to your house, and every piece of artwork you've ever done is laying out on the floor. What do you before I get there? What do you hide so that there is no way I will ever see it?
My secret sketchbook.
Enough said.
I have a sketchbook where I experiment, ink, colored pencil, gouache, watercolor, brush pens, whatever. I just do stuff in there, and it's for me only. I will never show that to anyone. And that relieves a lot of the anxiety about performance.
Are
So
you hiding the imperfection in your art in that case, or are you hiding the parts of your brain that are coming out in that art, or both?
a bit of both, but a lot of hiding my brain. You wanted to explore my
Parts of
brain
you.
earlier, and Agnelli said, "Oh well, it's not a very pretty place."
Mm,
And that secret sketchbook allows me to express the often dark thoughts that I have,
mm.
that I don't want to A, burden people with, or B, make myself too vulnerable about.
And that brings me back to your attraction towards that urban aesthetic, which you called human, right? Because
Mm,
you said, you don't want to take a picture of a rusty fence and a brick wall. You want to take a picture of a rusty fence and a brick wall with a person leaning into it that's pensive, or with a person hitting
mm,
it with a hammer, or you want that human element in there.
yep.
And I think sometimes those it makes sense to me. Your answer makes sense to me, because I think sometimes those urban landscapes and that locational art and that freedom is this surfacing of some of that
Mm,
darkness.
yep.
Like if you're painting a still life or nature, or you're photographing a bird, it's not doing that. But when you're so deeply into the human condition that you're
Yep.
in a place that is 100% of a human environment, with 100%
Mm,
of a human reacting to that environment, you're starting to surface that depth.
yep.
So I think that there's a relationship between those things. Well, I hope that if we end up on a deserted island, that you bring that quilt, because that sounds wonderful. And I hope not to ever stumble upon your secret sketchbook, because that doesn't sound like something I want to even get into, Nick. But I hope that the things that you need to surface out of that sketchbook and into your regular art, I think that part of the process is finding out how to do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. There's certainly things that I'm figuring out as I'm doing doodles in my secret sketchbook that
Mm.
actually come out of there, and that I'm using in everyday things that I'm happy to share with other people.
Well, I'm going to also say secret sketchbook. Great title for a novel. Not a bad band name either.
I have so much musical talent in me that if I played musical instrument, I would kill all the vegetation around me. They say music like plants like music. Well, my music, they wouldn't.
I'm right with you. Yeah. Don't ask me to sing. Don't ask me to keep rhythm. I'm not going to do it. I think we're getting close to the end of our time, Nick. Is there anything that we didn't cover, or anything that you kind of want to bring up about your artwork? Um, any of it that that you think is important that we didn't cross over?
Yeah. I would like for people to think about me as a multifaceted kind of person. I'm
Mm,
not just that disabled guy. I'm not just that angry crip. I'm not just this digital accessibility expert. I'm I'm a husband. I'm a son. I'm a human, and part of that humanity means that I'm going to be doing sketching. I'm doing to be quilting, and I'm doing photography. And who knows? Maybe a year down the road, I'm gonna say, "Hey, there's a new creative thing I've just heard about, and I want to try that." And I'm hoping that people that see me bouncing about from one to another type of creative practice see it as exploring creativity rather than being aimless and not sticking to something. Because maybe the practice I'm using right now is different than the one I'm using 6 months down the road, but I'm still practicing creativity rather than not sticking to one thing.
one of the sayings that we have in the martial arts, that my group of people have in the martial arts, is we say there's nothing better than being a white belt. Everybody wants to get to that black belt. And we say the most fun that we have is being a white belt. And this oftentimes brings us to study other disciplines, right? You said you did judo, you said you did tai chi, and I've got a bullet list. And I stick with ones, but I also try other ones. And I think it's that same thing, Nick. Like art is a process
Mm,
before it's a final product. It's about the journey, it's about the creation. And sometimes the most satisfying form of that is when you've got something brand new, a brand new skill you're trying to acquire, a brand new medium you're trying to figure out how to work with, but something that is returns you to the
mm,
beginning and causes you to rediscover from that perspective.
yeah.
So I don't know if, I'm sure you're talking from a place of experience when you say you hope people think of you that way, but I, to me, it just makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that it's really one of the ways that we don't discover who we are and the things that we're good at. We discover who we are in how we interact and react to the things we're not good at, or
Mm,
to adversity,
yeah.
or novelty, or whatever. So
A-
I
And
appreciate that you do that.
there's growth in discomfort.
Mm, yep. 100%. Then that's where, again, maybe we're a lot of like, I'm like, people say, "Well, you want to go on vacation? Let's go to, the all inclusive." I'm like, can we go right in the middle of town? Can we
Yeah,
go find those people that don't want us to be there? I want to hang out with them. Right.
yeah,
It's, there's comfort for me in discomfort sometimes,
yeah.
into having having the edge of your blade ground against a little bit. That's what makes it sharper. Well, Nick, I feel like we could do 10 more of these, and I still wouldn't get to the center of who you are entirely,
Mm,
nor do I think I ever want to be there, because the discovery is the point.
yeah.
This was amazing, and I'd love to keep going, but I know we've got to
I had
wrap it up.
a wonderful time, and I'm so glad I picked you to interview me. This was
I
so
am
much fun.
I'm so glad that you picked me too, and it was an absolute honor. And if you feel like you've got more of a story, I'd be honored to step back into this role anytime.
Mark, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, if you were inspired in any way, or if you learned something, please leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or whatever podcast aggregator you use. Ratings and reviews really do help. Thank you. And that's it. I'm Nic Steenhout. This is The Work Between. If this sounds like the kind of conversation you like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.